And it has us wondering, well, it has me wondering, if we're wrong about big men in the NBA and specifically Rudy Gobert, because I think one of the things we've seen is that guys like DeAndre Ayton, who I think he is by no measure the best center in the NBA, right? I think we all can agree on that. But I think there's no doubt that now you have a guy in DeAndre Ayton who is becoming the benchmark, the prototype for NBA centers. The guy can run the floor. He's really athletic. He's got touch at the rim, and he's got a little bit of a jump shot. That seems to be what you need in a big. You need more of a power forward with a jump shot than a true NBA center. And we have said routinely on this show that Rudy Gobert is the reason the Jazz, or one of the reasons the Jazz did not win a championship last year. So, Jake, have we been too hard on Rudy Gobert, and are we wrong about Rudy Gobert?
I mean, it's hard for me to say if we've been too hard on him. I think the simple fact of the matter is that there's a lot of room for Rudy to grow, and I think we can all agree on that and have agreed on that. And I think the hard part with Rudy is just that he is a phenomenal big man in the league. I mean, you're talking about a guy who is a defensive player of the year guy. You're talking about a guy who causes a lot of problems for opposing offenses who are trying to operate. There's no doubt that he is I would even call him a gifted defensive player at his size. I mean, that's just not in question. But, the struggle, I guess, is just that I feel like when you're an NBA player or really, a professional athlete, you are literally paid to get better at your craft. And whether we're talking about, Rudy Gobert or a pitcher or a NASCAR driver, right? I mean, these guys are paid professionals. And so my thing just always has been that I think Rudy really, needs to stop playing in the Olympics, let's say, and needs to start working on his offensive skill set. Because the truth is it's not just the jumper or like a baby hook. That's not just what he needs. He needs the ability to be able to dribble, one, two, maybe even three times to get to a spot on the floor. He needs the ability to, at times, not consistently, not run the offense through him, but at times he needs to be able to back somebody down and then finish off of that position on the floor. And so I think all of these things in Rudy's game don't make him a bad player, but when you have championship aspirations in the Utah Jazz, one of the first places you're going to look is the stars on your team, right? And without a doubt, Rudy Gobert is one of the stars of this team. And so when you start looking at that skill set, you're like, okay, well, what would our offense look like if Rudy could make a elbow jumper consistently, let's say? Or what would our offense look like if the defense had to respect Rudy Gobert with his back to the basket on the block?
Right.
Those are the type of questions I ask. And so, I don't want it to come off like I hate Rudy, because I don't hate Rudy. I love what he brings defensively for the Utah Jazz. But I also think when you want to win championships, the level of accountability goes up. And I don't think that that's unfair. And so to answer the question directly, have we been too hard on Rudy Gobert? No, I don't think we've been too hard on Rudy Gobert. I don't. I think that Rudy, if he were to expand his offensive repertoire, I think they would be a better team. I just don't think that that's harsh to say. So no, I don't think we've been too hard on him. No, I don't.
I think that, honestly, we've been very critical of Rudy Gobert, but I think it's been justified. And he put up a huge game in his preseason debut the other night. We're a week away from the NBA season. And I think one of the things that's so hard for people to understand is the changing role of the big man in the NBA.
Yeah.
Because I think when you look at who's the best team in the NBA right now, well, I mean, the odds-on favorite to win the NBA title right now is the Brooklyn Nets. So you look at their bigs, they don't really have a number one center. If you look at the way that they play, the Brooklyn Nets run a biggish lineup on the regular because Kevin Durant's a 7-footer. And if you look at the way, that their dynamic works, guys like DeAndre Jordan no longer fit into their mold as core players on that roster. So my point in saying that is that's really become the way the league has worked. I look at the current NBA champion, Brooklyn Nets. Who's their center? Well, it's Lopez. And or Lopez, excuse me. Brooke Lopez is a guy that isn't a traditional center. He shoots a lot of threes for them, but when they needed a big guy at the rim, what did he do? He went down and played at the rim. The problem is Rudy Gobert can't do either of those things. So when I say, hey, I have real reservations about whether or not the Utah Jazz can win a championship with Rudy Gobert as a centerpiece, a foundational part of their team, my biggest concern is two things. Playoff basketball is completely different than regular season basketball. So if you look at the way, again, the LA Clippers addressed Rudy Gobert, is they went small and they pulled him out of the paint and they made him choose. And they consistently burned Rudy based on which way he was leaning. If he leant to protect the paint, Terrence Mann was in the corner. If he leant to protect the corner with Terrence Mann, the paint was open. There's no way to compensate for that because he's not mobile enough to do both. And the defense, which by the way, I don't think is improved, and I could be wrong about this, and I'm open to this conversation. I don't think the man-to-man defense one-on-one is improved because, again, I look at the guys who generally start for this team. I'm telling you, Royce O'Neal is, in decline. I'm telling you that when you look at the best team in the Western Conference, whether that be the Suns, the Lakers clearly have completely remade their roster. I look at the way the Lakers are built. The Talen Horton-Tucker injury is a massive blow to the LA Lakers. It's a big deal. But did you see how they played last night against Golden State? You look at Carmelo. Carmelo is no longer just a three-point shooter. All of a sudden, by some accounts, he's lost 12 pounds, and now he's running the floor. He's much more athletic, and he's getting to the rim and catching alley-oops.
Yeah.
You're seeing athleticism amongst the top teams in the Western Conference. How athletic is this Jazz team?
I mean, I don't think they're no one's going to, accuse them of being the most athletic team in the Western Conference. That's for sure. I think, athleticism has been something we've been talking about with this team for a little while now. And even yesterday on the show, we were talking about guys who are movable or tradable or who are guys that could be trade chips for the Jazz. And Bogey got brought up. And while Bogey is not the most athletic guy in the league, he has a lot of value. And I think you see that trend of player, that kind of player across this entire roster. You look at again, not that I'm hating on Jingles, but Jingles is a good example of this. A guy who can really shoot the three ball, a guy who's pretty solid in the pick and roll, but isn't super athletic. So defensively, you pay a bit of a price depending on who the matchup is. And then, I look at what was George Niang last year, right? You had another guy in him who was not athletic. So I think the Jazz have done a good job of moving on from some guys who frankly just didn't pull their weight, and that's okay, but they moved on from them, and they've gotten better. But needless to say, when I look at the athleticism and I'm like, well, where am I going to put the Jazz? Yeah, I mean, they're not as athletic as a Golden State. They're certainly not as athletic as either of the LA teams. So, it kind of begs the question, okay, well, if you're playing them in a 7-game series, what does that look like? Because LeBron at the 4 against the Utah Jazz is going to be a problem, just like it's going to be a problem for several other teams. So, again, to get back to Rudy and this whole thing that we're talking about this morning, it's not that we hate Rudy Gobert. But what I'm just simply saying is that, this conversation would be a lot different if the Jazz were just trying to make the playoffs. If the Jazz were just trying to scrape in as an 8 seed.
That's exactly right.
But you're not just trying to be an 8 seed. You're trying to win championships. And so if you're trying to be a championship caliber team, that means that you have to really look at the details. And the details in Rudy's game are what stand out to me. Just like we talked about Donovan playing too much hero ball or like Royce O'Neal, like you were just saying. I mean, there's highlights on Twitter right now of Royce O'Neal completely bricking a shot in transition after Donovan makes this great defensive play.
Yeah, the other night when Donovan makes that behind the back save, he threw it to half court. And I think, and this is part of the issue when we talk about our teams, right? Like and this is one of the reasons I'm not passionate about teams in the NBA, that I'm much more of a players fan. Like when you look at the Utah Jazz, you have to take your emotion out of it. To be truly objective about it. And if you look at the guys that you're really attached to on this team, it's Donovan Mitchell and everybody else. That's it. I mean, this idea and the passionate fight to keep Mike Conley on this roster, again, Maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe we're wrong about this. I think it was a mistake to pay Mike Conley that money. I think if you don't win now, I don't know that you're going to have a chance to win for 3 more years because there's going to be a significant change in the salary structure of this roster.
Yeah.
And if you don't, the other thing that a lot of people are not talking about is if you don't get off to a hot start, if the Jazz don't get off to a hot start, you're going to have to make significant moves at the deadline. Because if this is not an elite team, and if this is not a team that is obviously competing for an NBA championship, what are we doing paying the luxury tax? That's a question. Yeah, that's a question that has to be answered.
It's a meaningful, dynamic question. And what I mean by that is yeah, you're paying a luxury tax, but when you look at, and this is why we were so hard on the don't sign Mike Conley train, because what signing Mike Conley did is it added to the Rudy situation, which added to the luxury tax situation essentially. And so, you look at the Jazz and you're like, okay, we never like to call the Jazz a small market team, but by Los Angeles standards, the Jazz are a smaller market team, right? So when you're in that situation and you are a smaller market team, you don't have the ability to pay the luxury tax year after year after year after year and just think that that's not going to have any kind of ramifications. So, yeah, like right now, like if the Jazz did nothing, if they didn't trade anybody the rest of the way this year and they just played the string out, they have to win a championship now because next year, when the thing that nobody talks about is when you pay the luxury tax year after year, the bill goes up, the percentages go up, the league penalizes you for that.
Yeah, the way that works is if the first year you pay the luxury tax, like let's say your salary cap does not change, but you continue to, go over the tax threshold, every year the percentage of tax is higher.
Yeah.
So you're paying more and more money, even if you're not adding more salary. So when I look at where the Jazz are, I think we're in a very important moment in time. And this is, as much as we joke about Joe Ingles with James Knight and our Australian listeners, this is a very critical moment in Joe Ingles' career because if the Jazz don't get off to a really hot start, and if he does not play well right out of the gate, because Joe, they don't have the luxury with the Jazz do not have the luxury of just having Joe Ingles be a one-dimensional, your job is to catch and shoot a three-pointer. They need flexibility there. They need athleticism on the wing. Because now with this heel surgery that Rudy Gay is having, he was not going to be a wing defender anyway.
Yeah.
But with that surgery, you're going to wait some time for him to be available to you. So it puts a little more onus on other wing players. Bojan Bogdanović has to have a quick start.
Yes.
He has to get off quickly. I'm telling you, the other guy that you have to improve is Royce O'Neal. And I just think that Royce O'Neal is who he is. He will never be better than he is right now. He won't. He's not going to be a guy that's going to shoot routinely 40% in volume because you don't want Royce O'Neal shooting volume threes. Because if he's shooting threes, what's Don and Conley and Bogey and
I'm glad you brought that up because here's the question I would pose. What does this team want? What is the best style of play for the Jazz?
They need to run up and down the floor, and they need to play exceptional half-court defense.
Everybody said last year, well, 3-and-D, 3-and-D, 3-and-D. But I don't know that that's actually the best style of play for them. I agree with you that I think the Jazz thrive when they play with pace. And we see this all the time in the NBA. It was a big talking point with the Suns when they were in the finals, how slow the pace of play got with Chris Paul on the floor.
Yes.
With the Jazz, I look at the Jazz and I'm like, that's great. You've got 3-point shooting all over the place, but why don't we take the high percentage look from 3 feet from the basket and guarantee us a bucket? Like, why wouldn't you take that 10 times out of 10, And so I just think overall, listen, I don't hate Rudy. I don't hate anybody on this team. I think they're a really, really good team. But again, I'm just going to continue to maintain all season long. When you have championship aspirations, you don't get the free pass of, well, you're making 40 and, you're really a one side of the floor guy for the Jazz. And everyone's going to say, well, he had 19 and 19 the other night. We've talked about this. 19 and 19 out of Rudy. What does that mean because of the way he plays the game? Well, that means that they're not shooting well from 3. And that's okay. If he's going to clean all that up, that's great. And I'm happy for him. But I would love to see what this team could look like if Rudy Gobert could get his own bucket.
Well, and this also is a conversation about the rest of the roster too, because I also think this is part of the Jordan Clarkson conundrum. Jordan Clarkson's really good. I mean, he is the NBA sixth man for a reason. But how much is too much Jordan Clarkson? Because he is a black hole. The ball goes in, it doesn't ever come out. And when he is red hot, that's a good thing. When he's falling out of bounds in the corner and, the ball hits 26 beams in the ceiling and it's still going in, okay, that's awesome. When he's falling out of bounds and it's an air ball, or they're on the break and it's a brick, it's not awesome. Or when we get into the postseason and his percentage is not great, and all of a sudden Jordan Clarkson's watching the game for the last 5 minutes, that's not ideal. Because I look at this roster, I look at this depth chart, I'm telling you, Conley, Mitchell, Bogey, O'Neal, and Rudy are not the 5 that are going to win you a championship. They're not. And you are going to have to find a way to improve Royce O'Neal and Joe Ingles.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to trade Bojan Bogdanovic. And we've talked about this ad nauseum on this show. I'm a Bogey guy.
Yeah.
I believe he has. I don't know that Quinn Snyder's found the best way to use Bojan Bogdanovic. The guy we saw when Don was hurt is the guy this team needs every single night.
Yeah.
How do you get that from him with Don and Conley on the floor? And the answer is I don't think you can. Because I think Bojan Bogdanovic, if he's a number 2, that's exactly what you want. Not good enough to be a number 1, right? He's not a guy that you want to say, okay, we need to win, give the ball to Bogey, because that's probably not going to be a good thing. But if he's your number 2, if you're on the break and you can kick to him for a 3, that's great.
Yeah.
But if he's your number 3, or if he's your 4th option, or if he disappears for long stretches, that's not very good.
Well, and I think that goes two ways as well, because if you think about it, if the Jazz were to make some moves here, and let's just say, just hypothetically, right, just like the what if game, not saying that this is going to happen, but just the what if game. What if the Jazz were able to upgrade Joe Ingles and Royce O'Neal, and all of a sudden they got 2 guys back that forced Bogey to be the 4th option on this team? Well, that's a different conversation now, right? Now your starting 5 is well-rounded and you have quality at every position. But that's the thing. And this is kind of what we alluded to when we were talking way back when about the dynamic Paul George had against the Jazz.
Yes.
You had the Clippers had superior talent at every position outside of Donovan Mitchell's position. I mean, that's just the truth of it. And I just think that overall, it's not that the Jazz suck. It's not that any of these players suck. But I think, again, I know I keep saying this. When you want to win a championship, there's a certain way you have to go about things. It's not just good enough to do what you've always done. You have to get better.
That's right.
That's just what it requires.
Yeah. So anyway, the way to put a bow on this is I'm staying with my position. I don't believe that Rudy Gobert can be a foundational piece on a championship team with the limitations that he has offensively and in playoff basketball in the half court defensively in playoff basketball. I just think Rudy's too limited. Because the elite teams in the NBA do not play big on a regular basis.
Yeah.
They don't run through their 5s. And again, when you have LeBron and AD's your 5, that makes life very difficult for Rudy Gobert because Anthony Davis is not a guy, in my opinion, that's going to be posted up a lot. I think that's a guy that when you're playing the Jazz, you want Rudy out of the paint. So the question is then, how does Hassan Whiteside match up with a guy like Anthony Davis? I think we all know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
You're still not going to get great offense out of Hassan Whiteside or Rudy Gobert in those kind of sets. Let's get your comments. Gabe Ledley says, my dudes. What's up, Gabe? Good to see you. Ramiro says, good morning. Edgar Garcia says, my boys, what is up? How are you? Zach Thornton, James Knight, what's up with you? The blind swordsman Diaz says, hey, going with the title, I don't think you're wrong about Rudy, but the Jazz, maybe. I cannot tell you how many convos my in-laws and I have about Rudy needing to be better offensively. So you're not wrong. I think that's the biggest gap. But we all just check the defensive box with Rudy Gobert, right? Like, oh man.
Well, let me ask you this. So with the defensive thing, I think it's tough for me to say, well, what happened against the Clippers is on Rudy, or like this team. Like Rudy is the end all be all on defense of this Jazz team. Like I think that's the easy thing to say
Yes.
about the Jazz. Well, they have Rudy Gobert, the defensive player of the year. They're the best defensive team in the league. But that's not true because NBA offenses are so dynamic and so intelligent with the way they go about it. You can have the defensive player of the year, sure, but if he's standing 10 feet towards the corner, he can't do that and cover the rim. And so this goes back to the athleticism thing, and this goes back to, okay, if you're the Utah Jazz, you do need to move Jingles. You do need to move Royce O'Neal, even if it is for younger guys who are more athletic and just bring you more defense. If the Jazz could cut down, let's even say 5 possessions off of the opposing team's offense, what would that do for their season?
And I still maintain the biggest weakness defensively is their inability to move laterally and keep guys in front of them.
Yeah.
I think that's which I think is your point. I mean, that's the biggest issue. Spencer Morgan, what is up? He says, okay, but do you complain about elite pitchers in MLB who don't improve as hitters? Well, I mean, that's a completely different
now that's
thing.
a different thing.
Do I care that Walker Buehler didn't get a hit last night? I don't, because he dominated the Giants. I mean, I look at that completely differently. I think your lineups are built not to have the pitcher hitting. So I think when you are the Utah Jazz, you need Rudy Gobert to, if he's not going to have an offensive presence, which is fine. If all he's going to do is clean up and put back, which is fine, he had better be a stopper in every situation defensively. And I don't think anybody's capable of that.
Yeah.
I think it's not, and again, it's not Rudy's fault what happened against the Clippers. That's just the reality of it. The roster construction, it's Dennis Lindsey's fault what happened against the Clippers. But now Dennis Lindsey's not at fault anymore. The roster construction is on guys like Dwayne Wade, is on guys like Justin Zanuck, is on guys like all of this group that now has replaced Dennis Lindsey.
Yeah.
And I just don't know. We need to see it in practical form. We need to see how this roster comes together. Is Rudy Gay going to be healthy for most of the season? This heel thing's a concern. I would load manage the hell out of your older players. Hell, I'd load manage Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah.
I would give him rest in back-to-backs. There are going to be nights where he's going to play 20 minutes. There are going to be nights where he's going to take time off. Now, that better be on the road, because I didn't buy season tickets not to watch Donovan Mitchell at home, right? Like, that better be on the road. So I just think that there are ways to go about this, but all I know is this team needs to come out of the gate and be the best team in the NBA again.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, I just don't know how you're going to be patient. Gabe Levely says, as far as the Gobert takes go, you really should take a minute to apologize to absolutely nobody. Rudy is what he is, strengths, weaknesses, and all. I agree. I think he just is what he is. And I think the hard part is when you see a guy like DeAndre Ayton growing and developing in leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
Like DeAndre Ayton's understanding defensively has gone up so much. Now, the problem, and this is a Rudy problem as well, you've said this repeatedly, I just don't think Rudy Gobert's a tough, gritty player.
Yeah.
I don't think I wish Rudy Gobert was a mean guy on the floor.
Well, I mean, it would just change the dynamic completely. I mean,
Yeah.
if Rudy changed nothing other if Rudy retired with the same skill set he has now, and he never developed a jumper or an offensive game or anything, but he played with a I want to kick your ass mentality constantly.
Mm-hmm.
I think he could be legitimately. I think he could be one of the best bigs the league's ever seen, and I'm not even kidding about that. I think as a big, you're the value of intimidating the other team mentally is massive, because we've all seen the highlights of the Spurs, not going into the paint because Rudy was standing there, but that's not because they're intimidated by him. That's because they're looking to get a better look, a higher percentage look than going one-on-one with them. More what I'm talking about is when you're playing Anthony Davis, let's say, when Rudy somehow got matched up on Anthony Davis, kick his ass, right? Be really physical with him. Be mean to him to show Anthony Davis that you're going to make his life really difficult.
It's the Patrick Beverley thing.
Exactly. Patrick Beverley. Perfect
You don't
example.
want Patrick Beverley on the opposing team. But if he's on your team, you love that he headbutted Devin Booker.
Yeah, literally. if you're an NBA coach, you're the way you're wording it is I'm setting Patrick Beverly loose on the other team's best player, and
Yes.
we'll just see how it works out.
And by the way, you love that he took both of Chris Paul's thumbs away.
Yeah.
I mean, he injured Chris Paul, and it likely cost the Suns a championship. I mean, that you need that on your team. Who is that guy on the Jazz roster? Furthermore, who is that guy on the Phoenix Suns roster?
Jay Crowder.
Is Jay still that guy?
I think he's got that mentality.
I think Jay is a difficult guy to deal with. I don't think that Jay Crowder is a guy. I don't think that Jay Crowder is a guy that you necessarily want to avoid.
PJ Tucker?
PJ Tucker is that guy. PJ Tucker uses his shoulders well. I mean, the days of guys like Charles Oakley or Rick Mahorn, obviously those days are gone.
Right.
But you have guys. I look at Marcus Morris. I think Marcus Morris has no problem with hard fouls. Or, I think that attitude and that mentality has real value in this league.
I'm not saying that Udonis Haslem is anything right now, right? But I do think that the way Haslem played the game is kind of a great example of what I'm referencing. Like, I would just love to see Rudy once in a while lay somebody out. I would love to see it, and I'm not saying to make it dirty, right? I'm not saying to hurt a guy, but what I'm saying is go after the ball, but also get most of the guy's body.
Well, and it's why Dwight Howard's on the Lakers. What did the Lakers miss? The Lakers missed that physical edge in the paint that Dwight Howard gave you, because Anthony Davis isn't that guy. When you come into the paint on Dwight Howard, you're going to get fouled.
Yeah.
He is going to physically bang with you, whether you're a guard or your mom. You go to the rack on Dwight Howard, you're going to get fouled. And if you try to run by him on a pick, he's going to hurt you. And I think that is something that every team needs, because the NBA playoffs are a grind. They are. And I think you look at Joe Ingles shouldering, Kawhi Leonard.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very good example of what I'm talking about. You need guys who will do that. And I don't think Joe Ingles had any intention to hurt Kawhi Leonard, but being physical, that's going to happen.
But you notice how Joe went about that, right? And Joe is good at this. There's no question about it. Joe Ingles is really good at this. It is a finesse skill to be able to do things that the refs do not see as bad as they actually are. Like that Joe Ingles play definitely didn't look as bad as it probably felt for Kawhi Leonard.
Right. Yeah. No, and I think that's part of the finesse of it.
Yeah.
Because you have to be able to be physical without getting a technical foul. You have to be able to be physical without, taking your team out of that rhythm or flow.
Look at Embiid. Look at Joel Embiid. Look at how Joel Embiid impacted Rudy when they were on the road in Philly.
Yes.
We all remember that game. And that, I guess, and we could go on about this a long time, but I guess just what I'm getting at is even if Rudy never developed an offensive game, which probably, if we're being realistic, probably he'll never have a really reliable jumper. If we're just being realistic.
That's very doubtful, yeah.
If being realistic. But if Rudy could walk onto the floor with the same mentality that Joel Embiid does, which is, hey, I'm gonna kick your ass and I wanna destroy you. Whatever that looks like, whether that's me knocking a jumper down or dunking over you, I'm gonna do that. And so often I just feel like Rudy's not that guy. He's more the guy that gets upset after the play and complains to the official. That's just what we've seen.
Yeah. Teddy says, I'm proud of you. You haven't brought up his contract one time. Do you want to bring it up or?
No, you know why? You know why, dude? You know why? And I really do appreciate that comment. You know why? We're not bringing up the contract because at the end of the day, he's getting paid what he's getting paid, and it doesn't change the aspirations of this team. They want to win a championship.
It is what it is.
So I just believe, and I'm not even trying to be a hard ass about it. This team, Donovan Mitchell, the stated leader of this team, has said that he wants to win a championship, and that's the goal of this team. So if that's the goal of the team, then I just believe that anybody on this roster should be held to a high standard of accountability.
Yeah.
That's just what I believe.
Let's get a couple more. Mind Axiom, good morning to you, my friend. He says, the Monty Show is now in my morning routine. Oh, we appreciate that very much. Thank you. Spencer Morgan says, as for Rudy, I think you have to evaluate his value based on a broad view of games and the impact he brings, not what uniquely rostered teams did to scheme in a series to negate him. But the problem with that is that that's how teams are beating the Jazz. They know that Rudy, as much of a strength as he is, and there's no doubt he's the most intimidating defensive player in the league. But to the elite teams in the Western Conference, you can scheme him. You can absolutely. And the other thing you got to remember is the Lakers. How did the Lakers go about getting at Rudy Gobert? Well, they attack his chest. LeBron James isn't scared to go at Rudy Gobert. Guys like Anthony Davis, guys like, I mean, you look at that roster, Russell Westbrook's not scared to attack Rudy Gobert. This is the Ben Simmons game where Ben just went straight at Rudy Gobert and got dunks and layups on him, because that's how you attack bigs. You don't shriek and try to throw up some circus fade shot that they're going to block. You got to put your shoulder in their chest. You got to do what Team USA did to Rudy Gobert in the Olympics. That's how you go at him. So elite teams know how to scheme him. Spencer also says, but I do agree he's overpaid given his offensive weaknesses. Yeah. Dwayne Boone says, it would be nice if Rudy scored more. As a team, more players need to rebound better. It seems most other teams and players can drive their way to the basket on the Jazz. Yeah, absolutely right. Brylark says the Jazz need to make the regular season look easy and do it early, or they're going to have to make serious moves. Yeah, I agree. They will have to make serious move. What the Jazz do at the trade deadline will show you how successful they will be, for sure. Jeremy Bolton, what's up? He says, who cares about the regular season, right? I thought it didn't matter. Load manage the S out of Ingles and Conley.
But I agree with that.
I agree with
as
that.
As much as that like is kind of, half joking, right? Or like tongue in cheek, like I agree with that. And I agree that Donovan should be load managed too. I mean, why do you think they load manage LeBron and Anthony Davis and Kawhi and all these guys? Well, it's because you got to have them for the postseason, or it doesn't matter what you did in the regular season. And I know that the Jazz, learned that lesson the hard way, and it's really unfortunate. But I do think that coming into this season, prioritizing health is going to be front and center.
Absolutely.
Hey, Jingles isn't available tonight because he played 30 minutes last night and he's feeling his ankle. Or, there's a number of reasons why you can sit somebody, but they will be sitting people from time to time.
All right, a couple more on this. James Knight says, are you saying Jingles wasn't flexible last season? Well, I don't know what his yoga routine has to do with this. I'm kidding. Please, he's the glue to this team. I agree he's a glue guy on this team. The problem with Rudy is, the problem with Jingles is he's just older now. So he can't run the floor the way he used to run the floor. He can't defend the way he used to defend. His highest, best use right now is a spot-up three-point shooter. That's going to be his role on this team. I think you're going to see that his minutes are going to be significantly less, and I think they have to be. Spencer says pace of play was a huge factor in the Jazz offense last year, especially shooting threes early on in the shot clock and out of transition. Yeah, and the problem is when you do that, it becomes a habit, and your habits become what you do on the regular.
Yeah,
and so ball movement suffers. So the Jazz are at their best when the ball moves to create an open three.